Good afternoon, and thank you so much for being here. I know we had quite a bit of excitement around this session, and I, for one, am thrilled to be here. The state of the story is our topic for today, and before I introduce my panelists, who I'm thrilled to introduce you to, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the context for this conversation. I'm the CEO and founder of Magnet Media. We're a strategic studio that believes that storytelling and data can really move the needle and drive business results more than anything else right now. And that came out of years of research around storytelling and where this trend is heading. We're releasing this week a global trends report on the future of media and marketing called The State of the Story. This is something that we did not actually originally come up with. It was something that our clients from Google and Chase and Mattel and these big global brands who were really struggling with the transition from advertising to storytelling had originally asked us to share with them what we were seeing in the market. And over the last several years, it's snowballed, so now that it's become a 10-month endeavor with tons of research and hundreds of data points, and we're really privileged to have so many key contributors. We've interviewed, dozens of the leading thought leaders in this space, both from the technology space as well as from media and marketing, and who are building the biggest brands today. This is a big challenge. Everyone's really trying to navigate the landscape. There's so many different choices and so many different, sort of competing data sets and strategies that we wanted to organize the state of the story into 4 discrete trends that we're coming out with this quarter that are each about a 1-hour presentation as well as an ebook and live webinar. So please check that out after the conversation today. But as we start to think about Carbon and their incredible success arriving on the scene within Silicon Valley initially and now really growing more globally, it's really they are sort of typifying this conversation around advertising and storytelling, as is Adidas. Advertising is increasingly blocked, skipped, and ignored, whereas stories are sought out, searched for, shared, and discovered. And I think that transition is really sort of the backdrop and context for today's conversation. I often think about this, and then in the practical reality, when we put away our research, I have to laugh because I have a 7-year-old, and sadly, he's not asking me to tuck him into bed at night with branded content. And so I posed to my team this challenge. Why are brands not commissioning more compelling stories, right? We all know that this is what people are consuming increasingly, that they're more effective as a medium, and yet it's rare to find something that is so completely extraordinary that it's mistaken for more traditional media. And before we have my guests join the stage, I just wanted to say I think there is a real analysis paralysis among all those choices, right? You have brands like Lego creating film franchises. You have Dick's Sporting Goods commissioning incredible documentaries that are winning sports Emmys. Slack and others are putting forth original podcasts. And so it is possible, but I think it's incredibly difficult to be thoughtful about your strategy and think through how can you navigate this landscape when there are so many choices. So that's really what we're going to talk about here tonight, and specifically around the big game, as that is one of the most cluttered media moments and a great opportunity to dig in on a rich case study that just occurred a few months ago. So with that, I'd like to bring Dara Treseder and Paul Francis to the stage. Thank you so much, both of you, for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Megan.
So Dara, maybe you could just start us out by talking about the elephant in the room, or I should say the shoes in the room. And really,
we're twinning up here really seriously, as you can see.
We're thrilled about the 4Ds. And really, what is Carbon for those who haven't heard of your brand before? You're new to the world, and give us a context for your brand strategy.
Absolutely. So Carbon is the world's leading digital manufacturing platform. We're actually fulfilling the initial promise of 3D printing by accelerating product innovation. So we enable companies to manufacture products at scale using 3D printing. And really excited to be here today with Adidas because we actually have partnered with Adidas to create kind of the 3D printed midsole that you can see on our shoes here on stage with the Adidas 4D line. And essentially, our brand strategy, it's really an ingredient brand strategy. Because at the end of the day, it's not our shoes, it's Adidas shoes. It's not our helmet, it's Riddell's helmet. It's not our material, it's J&J's material. It's not our car or the part in our car, it's Ford's car. So our whole brand strategy is around being a premium ingredient brand that really drives the success and growth of our partners. It's pretty much as simple as that, and I think it starts with purpose. Our purpose is to create breakthrough products that transform lives, industries, and the world. That's kind of what gets us up every day. It's what excites us. It's why we came up with this transformational technology, is to be able to create products that you could never make before to improve lives, industries, and the world.
It's a powerful purpose. Thank you for sharing that. And Paul, for those outside the sneakerhead world, what is a sports scientist?
Well, there's what's a sports scientist, and there's what's a sports scientist at Adidas.
Thank you.
So, you know, a sports scientist is someone who obsesses performance, right? But within Adi, yes, we do that, but we have opportunities that I don't think anyone else has in the industry. If you're a sports scientist at Man United, you're tasked with trying to keep those guys on the field and avoiding injury. If you're a sports scientist in the NFL, you can have the greatest ideas in the world, but the year schedule doesn't allow you to really exercise any of those ideas. So we have a freedom that I don't think really exists in the industry. And also within Adi, we're an open source brand. And so, you know, if creatives join dots, we have whole teams dedicated to try and create those dots for us to join. So we have an incredible opportunity, and I think when we look at the partnership that we've established with Carbon, I think that speaks to what sports scientists, engineers, and designers can do with an open source strategy.
Incredible, thank you. So as you think about that open source approach, and the fact that you have decades of data, right? Adidas is unique in that sense. Give me a sense of the fact that you have designers, engineers, sports scientists. How does that collaboration work, and specifically when it comes to something as challenging and promising as the 4D?
Yeah, I actually think we call them the three competencies in innovation: design, engineering, sports science. I actually think that was the secret sauce that allowed Adi to unlock this opportunity, because there's no roadmap to creating the new. Like, you're really starting from scratch, and I think that's where, by having those three competencies and those three expertise really come together and try and solve this problem. Not one of them could have solved it on our own, and Adi couldn't have solved it without Carbon. And I think that really speaks to the unique partnership that we have. Like, they're a world-leading 3D printing tech company. We're a world-leading sports company, and we've added that fourth D to the 3D, being the 4D tech, and that's that authentic sport experience. Because it's not about just printing a shoe and putting it on a shelf. It's making sure that it can make athletes better, and that's something that we could only really obsess with, getting those three competencies around the table.
So both of you are digging in on the first trend of the state of the story around purpose and mission. Thinking through how the role that data sort of played in this story. Take me through a little bit of the specifics, maybe, if you can, just anecdotes that you could share around how the 4D came to life.
Yeah, so I think for us, it was really exciting when our founder came up with this technology. It's called digital light synthesis, because essentially you're growing a part from a pool of resin using light and oxygen, and light is the chisel that allows the part to grow. So I don't know how many people in the room are familiar with Terminator 2, but if you remember that kind of object growing from liquid, that's really the science behind this. And when we kind of came up with the technology, we realized that one of the best applications for that was going to be creating geometries you couldn't make any other way. You can't manufacture it any other way. And we were really excited to see how we could do that for the running shoe. Because if you think about sort of the midsoles, you want to return energy to the runner. And so you want to be able to control that energy and return it. And so for us, we were really excited. And Adidas, just because of the company and the innovation is in the DNA of this company. Look, innovation is hard. Innovation is complex. True transformational innovation is messy. And it's really important to have the right partner that really understands that when you're going there, when you're going to a place nobody has ever gone before, it's hard. And so having a partner that really is committed to innovation, not just talking the talk, but walking the walk, was really critical for us, as we kind of embarked on that journey.
Yeah, and sometimes innovation can make people feel uncomfortable. And we weren't the first people to really think about doing this, but the first ones to really execute on it. And that's where I think, not just looking at the challenges that it faced, but also embracing the fact that 400 years of shoe building experience is no longer relevant. There's probably only one factor that probably just the bonding alone is the only thing that carries over from traditional shoemaking into this one. So this was really starting from zero, and that's where I don't think it could have just been a designer drawing some different geometries. It couldn't just be an engineer spitting it out, and it couldn't just be the sports sciences geeking out on the gate cycle. It had to be all three for it to work.
It's amazing. How did this innovative approach really turn out from a business perspective, again, for those outside the sneaker universe?
Well, I think we're bringing something that just hasn't existed before, and that's what was pretty paralyzing at the beginning, to really think, when you've got something where you've got absolute freedom, you've also got absolute responsibility of picking the right one. So starting with what aren't we going to do? And the big one was we aren't going to be limited by traditional manufacturing approaches, and we are definitely not going to compromise anything for the athlete. Normally when we're looking at a midsole, there's the opportunity to tune it by augmenting it. Where, as Dara was saying, this is tuning it by removing parts, and that was a really exciting opportunity, and especially as a sports scientist geeking out on it, the needs of an athlete during heel strike, during mid stance, and then during toe off are three different experiences. So to be able to take that technology and really geek out and take out what is not required to give the optimal experience, that was just good fun.
Yeah. As an 8-year cross-country and track runner, I can tell you it really matters. I mean, these are not small incremental changes. This is game-changing, and you're making your customers more competitive, which I love, as is Carbon making your partners, right? So thinking through then, just because we're talking a little bit about the context of Adidas and innovation, I loved, in looking at the history of the company and thinking through that the origins were, brothers starting an organization a company in their mother's home in the 1920s. Share, if you can, a story about how innovation has played a role in Adidas's history.
Yeah, well, you loaded me with what story to tell. But
a lot of them, I know.
Adi Dassler was doing this long before it was called innovation. And he was helping athletes long before there was a business in helping athletes. But I think the picture that you've got up there, that was a story from the '54 World Cup where it was the first boot that had retractable studs. So it was in the final, it was Germany versus Hungary, and it was very muddy conditions. And at half-time, he changed out the studs and gave them longer studs so they could have improved traction in the second half, and they went on to win the game. And a pretty incredible story. And back to your point before, that's not an advertisement. That's actually a story, which is pretty cool. But he would always say it's only the best for the athlete, and I think that DNA carries through. At Adi, we define an athlete as anyone who wants to be better through sport. Right? So if you want to improve yourself by being active, then we build for you. And we believe through that we can change lives, and that's where I think the synergies between the two companies were established.
Excellent. So Dara, just thinking about the kind of broader context for Carbon, and you're obviously new to the company, but come from companies that have a history of innovating, Apple, General Electric, right? You're always moving the needle. What was, as you think about, sort of the Carbon Adidas piece, maybe share with the audience, like how you decided, you know what, the Super Bowl, that sounds like a great place where we're going to start to, make some noise.
So hindsight is always 50-50. Actually, my first day on the job, I was in New York meeting with the head of the NFL, because we had, come up with a different partner, Riddell. We'd worked with them to create, again, taking that innovation and knowledge we had about this lattice geometric structure and how we can return energy. We started to explore, what if we were able to take a similar approach and create these geometries drawing on millions of data points of on-field impacts to dissipate energy, so we can improve player protection for the people that play football. And it'll be hard for you to find a company that loves football as much as Carbon, which is, as someone who, I haven't always been a football fan, but I love, on my first day, my boss was like, well, welcome, you are an Eagles fan. I was like, awesome, thanks. So the people in the company loved the sport, saw the kind of elephant in the room, and we're like, how can we use our technology to solve this problem? Creating these lattice structures. So the first ever 3D printed lattice helmet liner that dissipates energy. And so once we'd come out with that and worked with Riddell, and it had been used, by almost every team on the NFL had someone kind of wearing the helmet throughout the game leading up to the Super Bowl, it was a moment in time where we were going to kind of launch and officially announce this product. And why not take advantage of this cultural moment to do that? But the challenge was, it was 4 weeks to go, or 6 weeks to go at the time. There were 2 weeks for vacation. And I was explaining to my boss how, a Super Bowl ad usually takes several months and, tens of millions of dollars to produce, et cetera. And we started to think about, what exactly do we want to do? What are we trying to accomplish here? And when we come back to our purpose of transforming, creating these breakthrough products that transform lives, industries, and the world, what really stood out to us was, why not take the advantage of this cultural moment to really tell the story of improving player protection and put player protection front and center? And as much as when people are watching the game, whether they're watching it at home on, on cable, or they're watching it on YouTube, everyone's kind of on Twitter. That's where the conversations are happening, is on Twitter. Mm-hmm. And so we were inspired to kind of take a really disruptive approach of actually launching our campaign on Friday to kick off Super Bowl weekend, and actually doing it online, and doing it in a more kind of sort of where people are actually having the conversations versus, kind of the traditional channels.
That's obviously a strategy that I believe in. And just a data point for those in the room, right? A Super Bowl ad there's an elastic pricing to it if you think about both the creative and the media, but on average, in recent years, the average Super Bowl 30-second spot would cost a $5 million investment, whereas in 1967, when it sort of became, sort of the origins of great advertising, it was $37,000. So even adjusted for inflation, you're talking about quite a bit of, a heavy lift, I would say, from a budget perspective, not only to mention time. So thinking about all the other vehicles that we have to reach and engage audiences, I think, obviously it was a powerful choice that you made to go through those other channels. So maybe can you walk me through a little bit about the campaign itself. What components did you use to tell the story, and how did the Riddell partnership really come to life?
Absolutely. So when we thought about, the purpose, again, coming back to purpose, behind the campaign. For us, we really wanted to communicate the way to protect what you love is through innovation. Through innovation and technology, you can solve problems, important problems, real problems, problems worth solving. And so for us, we came up with a kind of a three-pronged approach. The first one was to really create these videos. So we created a series of videos. The first one was the purpose video that kind of told the story of football, how innovation has kind of played a role throughout the journey of the sport, and also kind of talked a little bit about the importance of the sport, the grit, the resilience, teamwork, determination, all of those things. And then we had a second video that was really more of a rally video that juxtaposed what an athlete does versus what we do in terms of our innovation and technology. So on one hand, you had kind of athletes training, right, preparing for their sport. You had us and our engineers looking at the problem, trying to figure out how to solve the problem. And we are both going 100, right? We're both giving it our all to, whether it's the athlete to bring their all and leave nothing on the field, or it's us at Carbon giving our all to make sure that we create the best helmet that we can make with this new technology. And then the third video was really the customer story. This was going into the history of the partnership, what we had been able to accomplish together, and really getting into the science and the tech behind the actual product. So we showed the Lattice engine that kind of simulates over 1,000 designs to pick the optimal design that makes sense for that athlete, given their position and other information we have about on-field impact. So it was really this sort of three-pronged approach we took to doing the video. Then we made sure we had a press blitz on launch day, right? So on launch day, our CEO, Joe, was on Mad Money with Jim Cramer. We had kind of a press tour in New York City. And so our press blitz was timed with when the video was launched, which was timed with our Twitter takeover, when we kind of launched our spotlight trend on Twitter. And it was, I think, looking back for us, we were kind of trying to sort of think, okay, how do we make sure we're having the conversations in the places where the conversations are going to be happening so that we become relevant and can really cut through the clutter. And I don't think we even anticipated that we would have the results that we had. We set big goals for ourselves, but I think we had no idea how successful it was going to be.
Yes.
And it's really, we were pretty surprised actually how we became one of the best performing spotlight trends on Twitter of all time. And I don't think we would have been able to do that if we hadn't really had sort of a three-pronged approach. And then we also had a live activation at the game where we had our machine, we displayed our parts, and we're able to kind of showcase it to athletes and influencers. So there was an experiential piece as well.
Thank you. And I want to also just talk specifically about, I know we're sharing a lot of the data as well around the results, and from a video view perspective, right, it sort of broke a lot of records. We've been distributing videos through YouTube for since the origin, since 2006 when Google bought YouTube, and rarely have we seen a campaign like this where for a 2-minute long-form piece, you're seeing, with a projected goal of 500,000 viewers in that same time frame, well over 3 million, and now I think it's close to 4. So there was a real organic traction that came from that three-pronged approach. And additionally, you now also saw, which again is a rarity, people leaving the platform, coming back to your site to hear more, learn more about what Carbon is, explore other partnerships like 4D, and I mean, we were just really thrilled, and obviously, as you know, from the enthusiasm I shared with you personally, hearing all these big wins for a long-form piece to be at the high end, well above average from a completion rate standpoint, from a sort of forwarding and sharing and commenting standpoint. It was really high engagement. And the reason why I'm digging in on some of this is I'm seeing the questions come over the feed, and there's a lot around ROI and success, and so I wanted to get into a little bit of the secret sauce behind it.
Yeah, and I would be remiss if I didn't share the partners that worked with us to kind of help make it successful. I think I'm the first CMO that Carbon has ever had, and a lot of our company, the way we tell our story needs to, make sure that it matches with how our partners tell our story. So we've really been inspired by Adidas and Adidas's approach to storytelling, which is not shying away from the tech and the data, but really talking about it and talking about it in context of the benefit to the athlete, and really kind of putting that front and center. And we also work with Magnet Media, so Megan's firm, which actually really helped us with kind of our distribution strategy, and Giant Spoon, who I'm sure you guys are all familiar with. If you haven't seen the Bleed the Throne activation for Game of Thrones, make sure you stop by there. We're our kind of creative partner in thinking about this. So it was kind of a 4-week sprint to kind of make this happen. And to be honest, I almost didn't believe it was going to happen. But really, really excited about the results. And I think in the end, what really matters as a marketer, even when you're doing brand campaign, et cetera, it's all about what was the business impact, right? Did this actually drive business impact? And for us, it really did. It 10x'd our lead volume, which was really huge for us, and really set us up in a good way to start the year.
Awesome. So then getting back to, I want to leave enough time for questions as well, but thinking through kind of just how data has played a role. Obviously, we're talking a lot about the marketing data, the athlete data. We skipped over that a little bit in terms of thinking through the process, and I know we talked about the lattice, but I would love to just hear a little bit more about, why is this such a strategic and important differentiated opportunity for Adidas to partner with Carbon in this way?
Yeah, well, speaking of data, does anyone have the data on the Duke-Carolina game so far?
We're all distracted.
No, I'm being serious. Does anyone? Okay, thanks, mate. I appreciate that. Yeah, so in terms of that, everyone in, well, probably from 2015 onwards has said people collecting data, but nobody knows what to do with it.
Yes.
And I don't really see that to be the case. To be able to do something with data, you need context around it. And that's where I think your point earlier about data and storytelling are so important, because for a story to have a connection to people, there needs to be context as to why they're going to care. And with data, there needs to be that context as what does it mean. So like if I was to say it's going to be 26 degrees, when? You need more than that data point. You need the data points, am I talking Celsius or Fahrenheit? And then I need the data points of what you intend to do and how relevant that could be. So data and storytelling are actually linked because you need context around them to action them. So how this relates to 4D is now we have the ability to create a lot more context in the way that we're using our data. People often ask, well, what are the data capture tools that you're using to create these shoes? We can't use one because we need so much more context now because it's so much more complex, and we've actually had to create some new tools that didn't exist before. So it's been exciting from that point of view to really see how much more context we need to put into something when it becomes this complex. And I think that's been a cool ride. Yeah.
Excellent. Did you want to add anything to that piece? You look like you're about to say something.
I think the thing that I found, and to be honest, I was a little bit surprised by this because I always knew, when you're telling a story, you want to make sure you're connecting to purpose, you're bringing kind of the emotion of the narrative so that whoever is, hearing that story can kind of relate and connect. But I didn't realize how much people want to know the tech, about the tech behind the product. And I think just because we're kind of in this age where people are increasingly have access to information and data, right, at your fingertip. You want to find anything, go to Google, right? Google it, you'll figure it out. It's kind of taken the mystery out of a lot of things. Also, you tend to find out that you don't have any real good ideas, because when you have an idea, you Google it, someone already came up with it, even if they're the other side of the world. But we are in an age where people have knowledge and can access knowledge very quickly. We're in the age of the conscious consumer. So the consumer actually cares and wants to know more about the product they're consuming. They care a little bit more about the details. So we found that actually inserting the tech and being very strategic about how you marry kind of the storytelling, but bringing the fact that you're using data into it, showcasing the technology and the power of the technology, we've seen, has really helped us with communicating our story. For example, with the videos that we made, our customer story video, there's a point, at which most times when people are watching a video and it kind of reaches sort of the 60-second point, like everyone's out, right? And it was actually interesting. I was inspired by actually Eric, who's the CMO of Adidas. It was at a Carbon board meeting. He sits on our board, and he said, "Why don't you show the tech?" And so we actually made a last-minute switch and inserted the tech into the video. And so at that point where people would have drifted off, we showed the Lattice engine simulating these going through several iterations of designs. And guess what? It piqued interest. And people continued listening to get to hear the rest of the story. So I say that to just really inspire and just share, because I think as marketers, sometimes don't be afraid or don't shy away from bringing your customers a little bit into the sausage making. Being able to show them what the differentiation is and really articulate that, bringing your value proposition to life in a visual way can be very powerful.
And the counterpoint to that is each of your partners have different needs. And working with athletes, it's not like selling the new iPhone, because you can't lead with the tech. You have to lead with the benefit. Because anyone that knows athletes, they're habitual, they're ritualistic, and sometimes quite superstitious. So they all say they want to get better, but they don't want to change. Right? So you need to lead with the benefit. So, Carbon's a very tech-led company, and we, because we're in the sports industry, need to be a benefit-led company. So that's where I think that counterpoint was really useful, because an athlete's not just going to put something on and wear it into battle just because it's new. Actually, that's probably a reason why they won't wear it into battle. To get an athlete to adopt something for the Olympic Games is a 12 to 18-month process, right, for them there. So for an athlete to step onto a basketball court and be sure-footed, that's not something that you can impress someone with tech. There has to be that benefit to them that they can only get with that product.
They need confidence in that mindset to go into a game, right? It's anything that is off could be, throwing them, jinxing them, right?
Oh yeah, there's been criticisms of the industry that it's gone towards more of a fashion aspect, but confidence is the currency of every athlete. Look good, feel good, play good, and it's one thing to make an athlete feel like they can play good, but you're not going to get there unless they can look good and feel good as well. So confidence is an underlying point, and again, why we need to lead with the benefit, because an innovation is new, and new is often something that an athlete doesn't. Yeah, it's scary. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I love that that contrast too, in terms of the way the partnership has evolved is obviously complementary to both of your companies. You're making your end customers more competitive, and at the same time, have a different message to deliver, right? And around that key ingredient message, making sure that like an Intel Inside type positioning, right? You want to make sure that Carbon's incorporation into a product actually has a stamp that means something to your end consumer, and that people need to know who Carbon is if they need to have meaning attached to that labeling. At the same time, Adidas, obviously, you want to give confidence to your athletes that something like 4D, it's not so futuristic that it's, they're going to feel foreign or uncomfortable, or it might not work for them. That this is really an evolution, and that there are true benefits to this evolution, not something that's just the shiny new object.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I think gave us an advantage to get this to market so quickly, is that we used our incubator, the Future Kraft, where we started working in seeds with athletes, with coaches, with consumers, to really understand what this is and what it could be. Trying to do it in a black box and going to the industry, that doesn't work in the sports industry. And Addy, being an open source company, allows us to play around and seed things in different ways. Yeah.
And that open source, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I was just going to say, it sounds like it is culturally very aligned to what Dara has been talking about in terms of transparency, and also to the common sort of presence around the need for transparency, all that you spoke about in terms of brand purpose and the belief-driven buyer. That is obviously the very first chapter of State of the Story, largely because it's moving the needle from something that used to be off to the side as a corporate social responsibility initiative that was like a nice to have, making people feel good about the company they worked in, to a core central storyline in almost all of the Fortune 500. I mean, when we did these interviews, I was astonished to hear how the CEO and CMO are now paying attention to mission and purpose, sometimes because it was important to them personally, but a lot of times because it was moving the needle for their organization, for their stock price. So I think that that trend being, that meaningfulness, that transparency and authenticity is here to stay.
Yeah, and also just in terms of keeping up with the market, like the traditional product creation cycle is quite long, right? Where trends are moving quicker than the product creation cycle. So we need to be quick. And one of the ways to be quick, I think, is to be collaborative and open to move. And we've got a really talented open source team, both here in America, led by Shane Yoakum, and then another one in Herzo, and that allows us to connect with people and as I said before, connect dots that no one else would, and allows us to be quicker to market and create things. Because I can see here there's questions coming up about when I can buy 3D printed sneakers, but one of the things that I think people are forgetting is that this was deemed not possible 2 years ago. Like it was deemed not possible 2 years ago. So, and now you guys are rocking red shoes with 4Ds on the stage.
Y3s.
Yeah. They're pretty comfortable.
They're really comfortable. Yeah, and I think just one thing I thought was actually pretty important to point out, which I thought was really interesting, is also, the strategy of an ingredient brand I think B2B is such an almost antiquated way of thinking about it. I think it's really business to human, because at least for now, the robots aren't making purchasing decisions just yet. We still have humans doing that for the most part. And I think it's really important that as we're talking, we're able to kind of communicate and really build the relationship with the human, right? So if you think about the benefit to the end customer, the athlete, they want to know about the shoe and the performance and how is this going to help me. But if we're thinking about, the benefit to our customer, like in this case Adidas, which is open sourcing and looking at innovation, you want to understand how is this technology going to help me make the impossible, right? And actually 3D print a sneaker. That's sort of the benefit. So I thought that was just a really powerful point, because I think the benefit, even when I might have said, hey, we're leading with the tech, but why are we leading with the tech? Sure. We're leading with the tech because that's what matters. When you are trying to evaluate and figure out, is this the right platform for me to buy? Is this platform actually going to accelerate product innovation? Understanding why and how is pretty important.
Awesome. I want to make sure that we save enough time because we're getting a stream of questions here. Are there specific ones that you would like to answer?
Yeah, sure. There's a question here kind of about fostering innovation. So it's Dara. I think we could maybe put the question on the screen here. The question is really kind of asking about fostering innovation. Before I came into this role, I was actually at GE. I was the chief marketing officer for the business innovation group, which included GE Ventures. So I can speak from my time here, but also my time there as well. I think the important thing is, I always think it always starts with the people, because the people have the ideas. And then how do we actually execute on those ideas and make it real? And one of the things that's been really powerful is this idea of convergence and intersectionality. So for us, the reason we were able to have this breakthrough innovation is because we are sitting at the intersection of software, hardware, and material science. So we have created a software-controlled chemical reaction, right? And we then had to build the printer that could actually grow these parts. But guess what? It doesn't matter if the end product is not a final product. So we had to innovate around the materials to create materials that actually would put a durable, real part on the market. And so really that convergence, I think, is really powerful. And I'm seeing that not just in our space, but across the board. So I think, in order to sort of really foster that innovation, thinking about convergence, I think, is really a very powerful way to think about how to actually take some of those ideas. But it starts with the people, so it starts with all of you, and it starts with your great ideas, your crazy ideas, the big ones.
Thank you. I want to just jump down to the measurement of ROI, because I know that was a theme in a lot of the conversations as well. Excuse me. But I think, the question is, selfishly, I want to know how to sell it to our C-suite. we all need this. And that was really, again, part of the origins of the Global Trends report, was really to say, okay, there are so many data points out there. Who's doing this well, and how are they persuading their internal constituent map that branded content is going to be valuable? I think one of the things that we've found, I'll answer it first from a B2B perspective, is that multi-touch attribution is so critical. So thinking about all the different platforms that you were listing earlier, you had a press strategy, a Twitter strategy, a YouTube strategy. We didn't really talk about LinkedIn, but LinkedIn was critical. And surrounding that, a lot of the metrics that I just threw up there were, could be seen as vanity metrics if they didn't have the business context. But ultimately, Carbon has revenue goals. You have accounts that you're trying to tackle, right, in different verticals. And so around those components, without getting into too many specifics, I just want to say that, that part of it is really critical in terms of selling in, at least from my experience, is thinking through in a B2B environment, who is the ultimate, what does success look like, and how do we back out metrics for each campaign?
Yeah, and I think really taking an audience-first perspective. I think branding campaigns, two things. First of all, don't do a brand campaign if you don't have your demand gen stack in order, because you're going to generate a whole bunch of leads that you're not going to be able to nurture, you're not going to be able to cultivate, and guess what? You're not going to get the ROI. So I find, sometimes people are launching brand campaigns, but the infrastructure, right, your kind of solid demand gen engine to capture all of that energy and enthusiasm and interest and awareness and convert it into tangible growth of the business is missing. So always make sure that you put the horse before the cart, not the cart before the horse before the cart. And I think that's really important. The second thing that I think is really important to think about when you're kind of doing this sort of branded content is really making sure that you are clear on what success is, right? Because if you map out a multi-touch attribution journey, the metrics are going to be different for each of them. So what exactly is success to you? And how does one thing maybe one thing doesn't necessarily generate leads, but because it's going to sort of initially create that awareness, create that buzz, that you're then going to move on to this next step. Really mapping out that journey, I think, is really important. And I think a lot of brands don't necessarily, it's almost like, we're going to do brand, and then we're going to do performance marketing. And they don't even talk to each other. We're just going to, the performance marketers are like, I need an orange button, because that causes people to click, right? And brand is over here doing its own thing. Really making sure that both teams are working closely together. And so I think when you're trying to sell it to your C-suite, having an integrated plan that's not just a brand plan, but really brand plus performance marketing or plus demand gen, I think really makes a compelling message.
Excellent.
I'll take
Did you want to say? Yeah.
There's a question there at the top. What are some of the disruptive companies you admire and why?
Other than Carbon, of course.
I think disruption, we often think is the outcome, but I think there's also the processes that we need to admire. A company that comes to mind straight away is the NHL. I think they have got some really disruptive processes in place in the way they're looking at data. And I think that may end up being disruptive, or some people may copy them and dilute their impact. But so that's where I think we need to look at the mechanics of how they're going about being disruptive. Probably the poster child for disrupting an industry right now would probably be Epic Games. I don't know if we know them by that name, but we would definitely have heard of Fortnite. The idea of giving a game away for free that has traditionally cost $60 more or less in a hard form. And we're not going to be limited to one platform. We're going to have it across all platforms and democratized to all users. That has completely flipped an industry on its head. And again, not the outcome that is really interesting, but their process. The fact that they still call the game a beta game. The fact that they change things in real time to increase this engagement. So the normal lifespan of the product isn't 12 months or 18 months like a FIFA or a Call of Duty. They can update it in real time. And again, I think that process for disruption is a more important metric than just being disruptive in itself.
Thank you. I love that perspective, because I think there's always this mystery around companies that succeed at innovation. Everyone's always trying to be innovative, but how do you really pull it off? And I think having that discipline around process and operational excellence it seems like that's a theme that I'm hearing from you, and it's really admirable.
Yeah, I think like innovation, I think everyone in the room would agree that's an overused word right now, and disruption is a pretty close second, right? But if we actually look at disruption, the definition for that is have consumers or athletes change the behavior. Like if we've changed behaviors, then it's been disruptive. So that might be the way they spend their dollars or the way they go about their day. But I think if we look at disruption in that way, it's probably going to be a bit of a cleaner definition.
Great, thank you. Did you want to pull another
question? I think there's one, a lot of people are upvoting this one, so I guess I'll take it, which is really kind of asking about the democratization of 3D printing. And here's the thing, when you're trying to make a product, not a prototype, but an actual product, final part, it's hard. And not only because Paul was mentioning up here, everything about the way it's made changes. And to create a powerful product using 3D printing technology for actual manufacturing, I think that is really going to be the first step of us seeing the power. Because 3D printing has been around, for about 25 years now. We've been talking about 3D printing. And I think we're just finally coming to the point where we're actually fulfilling that promise. We're actually seeing people wearing parts, using parts that have been made with 3D printing. But I don't think that in the immediate future, you're gonna have people kind of printing the shoes at home that they can actually run with and it will improve their performance. I think we are a ways away from that. I think what we're going to start to see are people like companies like Carbon manufacturing products, whether it's in the polymer space or the metal space, where you're actually starting to use these products and customers are starting to get familiar with these products and consume these products and use these products. I think that's what we're going to see in kind of the next sort of 5 to 10 years, because I think we're a little bit a ways away from people being able to, people will always be able to print prototypes at home. I mean, you can do that today. You can buy a Formlabs printer or whatever and kind of print prototypes in your house. But in order to kind of start actually making stuff, I think we are going to sort of see that happen more at a B2B level first. And I think that's kind of what's immediately on the horizon.
Great. I'll take one of the nerdier ones here, because I love, love the framing of the question. It's much easier to create a story around a physical product. Any advice on creating a story for a SaaS product? We do a lot of work in Silicon Valley. There's a lot of... I
actually disagree with that comment. Because clearly whoever wrote that comment isn't from Silicon Valley. In Silicon Valley, it's all about software. We've actually found it the opposite, where people are like, wait, I don't get it. So you make stuff? This isn't just like on the internet. No, we make stuff. And I think we're actually finding that everyone likes the software stories, because okay, this is like the Uber for this, the Airbnb of that, right? And so we actually have found the reverse to be true, where it's much harder to actually tell the story of a physical product as an innovation, because people pause for a minute. They gotta kind of figure out all the different parts of it. It doesn't necessarily make as much sense as like, okay, before you used to have to stand in line and wait and call a taxi, and now you can press a button and the taxi's right there.
And you're going to get annoyed if it's 6 minutes away, right?
Exactly. You're like, what the hell's going on?
But I think just in terms of from an advice perspective, I would just say that some of the work that we've done with Google Cloud or Salesforce, it's really about those emotional insights. A lot of what you were talking about earlier, I think that moving from a B2B mindset to a B2H mindset of really thinking about the human component. You know, how can you really inspire someone through a personal story? I mean, I live in New York, and I will tell you, you will be on a subway, and everyone looks like they're in some kind of futuristic Pixar movie where they're staring at a screen, staring at a screen, staring at a screen, even if you're in a crowded subway car. And someone will jump onto the car at a stop and say, talking to a friend, "You're not going to believe what just happened to me." And everyone puts down their phone. What just happened to her, right? It's a personal story. It cuts through the clutter, and I think that that's something that we found to be really successful with software companies and with physical product companies.
I think using a specific example to bring things to life, I love the work Microsoft recently did kind of around accessibility,
yes,
right? And all of the innovation and technology that they've done to make these products more accessible and telling those stories. I mean, it was very sort of, they kind of talked about the benefit and talked about the tech, but in the context of what it means and why it matters. And I thought that was really done very well.
Excellent. So thinking about just sort of, I know we have a few minutes left here. Do you want to speak about the open source piece? I don't want to put you on the spot.
I actually thought the biggest challenge had more
votes.
Great,
let's do that.
So what was the biggest challenge? Yeah. I think what we mentioned before, there was no roadmap to this. Like, we were literally making this up as we go. And in innovation, you shouldn't be winning with every decision that you make if you're really being innovative. And I think we did that pretty well, that they talk about you've got to be failing 50% of the time. I think we're overachieving.
Totally overachieving.
Yeah. But that's what made it cool, you know, because one of the challenges, I think, to answer this question is that innovation still is a P&L, right? And not everybody understands the innovation process. And I think really bringing everybody on board with through storytelling with, hey, these are the challenges that we've got, and these are the work streams against them. And in a new space, you're not guaranteed success out of the gate. And especially when there's no roadmap, and especially when we're trying to do something as complex, is not just 3D printing a static object, right? Where 3D printing something is going to live off a high-performing athlete or an athlete that wants this to work every time they go out for a run, and give them something they can't get through another product. That's a pretty high standard to be aiming for, and I think that the challenges around bringing that to life, that was probably the biggest one. But keeping everybody on board and satisfied with the speed, everyone wants everything now. That was an added challenge. Yeah.
And I think from Carbon, you don't know what you don't know, right? When you start innovating and doing something truly transformational, like, you learn things like, oh my God, when we have the coldest winter, our resin will crystallize. You know, you start to learn these new things. Resin is the material we use to manufacture our products. You don't know what you don't know. And you're gonna, when you're living in the transformational world of actually doing stuff, not Horizon 1, not right to the core, not just something that's adjacent, but something that's never been done before, you're gonna learn new things along the way. So I think the challenge for us has been, how can we be 5 steps ahead? And how can we plan better? But the reality is, we don't know what we don't know. So we have to be better at, like, building that buffer and really thinking about how to plan for chaos. Because when you don't know what you don't know, you're gonna kind of come up with some challenges. So how do we make sure that we really think about that and build that? Because we're innovating, everything is innovated. It's not just the fact that we're growing, it's like our supply chain is different, and we have to think through all of these different elements.
Elias has asked a question here. When evaluating the performance of the shoes, what tools do you use to analyze the data? This is a really big one, because we use humans. Because
best data source there is.
Yeah, but if we just leave it over to the robots and to the machines, we're going to get a predictable answer that was based on the people that programmed the robot or the machine. We're trying to create something new and see truly insights that no one else has seen before. And the only way to do that is through humans. And we're very fortunate to lead an incredibly talented team, but we've also got an incredibly talented network through the open source strategy. So I think the day that we stop using humans to analyze the data would be a pretty disappointing day.
It's a great tool.
As long as the humans are still the ones wearing the product, right?
Love it. So in the last 5 minutes, I also did want to just note, I forgot to mention that there are microphones as well, so in case people are not on the Slido. There's a question in the back.
Hello, is this working?
Yes,
Michael
perfect.
Patrick with Chick-fil-A. I love the storytelling. We take that to heart. Curious, we talk about shoe performance, what you, in the UNC Duke comment earlier, what do you think happened with Zion's shoe?
Plead the fifth.
I don't think I can comment on another company's performance of the product. Yeah, sorry.
Good try, though.
But, a question back to you. What's the score?
Oh boy, oh boy.
Thank you. I like you, mate. I'll buy you a beer after.
Well, there's a question here that has been upvoted, so I'm going to take this one on creating products. Thoughts on creating more product when there's an environmental crisis? How do you balance consumerism so we aren't creating for the sake of creating? I love this question so much because one of the things that really drew me to Carbon is the commitment to sustainability. Like, we really believe, okay, since we're changing the way products are designed, engineered, made, manufactured, and delivered, how do we make sure that we do it right? So we're constantly thinking about how do we make this more sustainable. And it comes from everything from how do we make more durable products so people don't have to, keep changing the products over and over again, to how do we make products that are more recyclable. So something I'm actually really excited to share, I don't know how many people here are, users or have used or used it for their kids or whatever, sort of clear aligner products. But when you make a clear aligner product, every time you're in the dentist's chair, there is a dental mold that's made of your mouth that is a single-use plastic that is then taken and dumped in a landfill. Okay, and think about how many chair visits you might go through, and just think about the landfills. And unfortunately, many of those landfills are landfills in developing countries. As someone who's from Nigeria, that makes me angry, sad, and a little mad. And one of the things we have been, as we're kind of breaking into the healthcare life sciences space and increasingly doing a lot of work in dental, a challenge that the team came up with is, what if you could make 100% recyclable resin? So after that single mold plastic has been made, you grind it up to powder, you convert it back into the next generation of resin, and it can be used to make other products. And so we've kicked off officially an initiative to work on this. It's hard. If it was easy, of course, everyone would be doing it. But that commitment to sustainability is something that is so deep and powerful to us, including as we make resins. How do we make more resins from biodegradable materials? We're constantly thinking about this, and it's a challenge that our material science team really takes very seriously. And so I think that commitment to sustainability is really important. And to be honest, that was one of the things we loved about Adidas, is Adidas is a company that truly shares that kind of commitment to sustainability. And that's kind of actually, I think you guys have put out there stuff about really wanting to kind of continue to really keep sustainability in mind. And you have, you guys have some products, right?
Parley being
Parley, exactly. So I think for us, it's a question of what we're doing ourselves and the type of partners we choose to work with, partners that really have that sustainability in mind.
That's awesome. And sustainability was, in the sort of brand purpose surveys that we did, one of the most important of issues that brands are aligning with. In fact, 78% of consumers are looking at companies' sustainability policies and expecting them to have a real mission.
We're in the age of the
commitment.
conscious consumer. People care. People care.
So critical.
And I'm glad people care. I care, so I'm glad people care.
Yes.
One, I guess I could maybe take the last
please.
question. The last question calls me out by name, so I'll answer it. You mentioned athletes' fear of change, and it talks about how do I overcome the fear of change when it comes to the focus or channels of storytelling. I think the most important thing that I try to do is I try to take a clear-eyed risk. So I always try to, engineer things backwards. So I think to myself, okay, what does success look like? And what is the least and I say least worst because it's literally least worst. You're not going to know until you launch the campaign. That's when you're going to know if it was successful or not. So nice to be here on stage and talk about how successful it was. If it wasn't successful, I wouldn't be here. But you know, I think it's really starting with what does success look like, right? And really, what is, when I look at and think about the different channels, what is the best channel to choose? And I think for me, I love having data. So the idea of a channel that I can't easily adjust, I can't easily change, because even when you launch creative, right, you have your, you do your focus group, you do your testing, but you got your plan B in case you launch with plan A, right, and the world doesn't think it's as funny or as interesting as you and, your creative agency did, you flip to plan B. So it's really making sure that I identify channels that give me the ability to tune and change and pivot as needed. And also channels that allow me to calculate the ROI, so not only when I win, but also when I fail, I can learn why, and I can do better next time.
Yeah, no, those are amazing criteria. I couldn't agree more in terms of like a lot of the innovators that we're looking at. That ability to, get input really quickly and adapt and change is like right up there. So you just articulated it so effectively. And I just really want to thank both of you and all the engagement that we've seen online and from the room. Thank you so much for this opportunity. We're, here on a Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening, really, and it's just it's a real.
And like Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez was also speaking, so I'm really surprised we even have anybody in the room. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you so much.